Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield, talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy. Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. Today, we've got, Nelly.
One of the biggest creeps.
Yeah. Just so you know, just to starting at the top, this is a big overview of Ronald Reagan, and it's one kind of section of his creepiness. There are others. Sonia may very well do one right away or pretty soon. We were just talking about it off the air.
Yeah. I think I'll pick up a part 2 and take on another segment of Reagan's creepiness. Like, there's a lot.
Y'all, we'll get into it. Let's just do the rigmarole that we always do.
Yeah.
We have a basic Facebook page. That's where people go to complain about our language. This is your warning. We use salty language in this program, and it might be extra Margot and Sonia rage-inducing today language.
Yeah, ragey Sonia Margot activated.
F words and C words are going to be dropped.
Yeah.
It's not going to be helped. Hide your children. Or maybe, I wish my mom exposed me at this age, at a young age, to some of this stuff because I would have known better.
That's right. Fucking deal with it.
We are much more interactive together in our private Facebook group. You do have to ask to join, but just answer a few questions. Do the best that you can. Be creative, even.
Yeah. It's the best group on Facebook. It's an awesome place to be. It's the only reason I go on Facebook, and we just talk about creeps and non-creeps, and we take recommendations.
We post pictures of our pets. We talk about fun things. So it's a nice place to hang out if you're looking for that in social media, especially with what they call doom scrolling or joy scrolling.
I've been doing a little hope scrolling.
Hope scrolling. That's a better word. Yeah.
I've been doing a little bit of that this week. I've been extremely online this week.
I wonder why. We're on Twitter as Creep Pod because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for 10 years and never used it. And we're on Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky at What a Creep Podcast. And we have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. Those are all great places to interact with us and also give us your suggestions for creeps and also non-creeps. If this is your first time listening, just so you know, we end every episode with somebody who is not a creep, so it gives you a little bit more hope about the world and the universe in general.
Yes, and this one was a request. We've got this person was nominated over and over and over in that Facebook group, so we're going to make a lot of people happy.
We're fun.
We are. We're super fun.
We're awesome. Sonia, speaking of awesome, tell them about their website.
Yeah, go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you want to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. You shouldn't be afraid to ask. But if you are, you can find stuff there. We have links to all of our past episodes. We're up to like season 26 or something like that. Like, by the way, that doesn't mean we've been on podcasting for 26 years.
It just feels like it sometimes.
Sometimes it feels like it, but we just have 26 seasons. Anyway, you can go there. You could search for a particular creep if you're looking for a certain episode, and then you can open that up, and we have all of our sources. We source everything we do, so we're not making this stuff up. We want to give people credit for the research they've done, the reporting they've done. So if you're looking for a deeper dive, great place to start. Do that. We also have a link to our merch shop where you can get t-shirts and tote bags and face masks, y'all. Get your face mask. COVID is coming back with a vengeance. I know so many people who have caught COVID in the last 2 weeks. It's bananas. So do that. And there's a link to our Patreon. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. That's look up What a Creep Podcast. We put our first 8 seasons on that wall, so that's on the paywall there. Also, we put out 2 bonus episodes a month.
They're the best.
And we are making those video now. So we are recording the Zooms and talking to us. Yes, and we just shoot the shit and talk about things that are happening in the news, things that make us happy, things that make us ragey, a mixture of a little bit of everything. And we appreciate everyone that supports us there. I want to thank Belle and Katja for joining our Facebook group. Our Patreon page. You can also sign up for it for free because we also have a show called Dorking Out, and we put the clips there from Dorking Out there. Or sometimes we put enhanced clips from the episode where we're talking about videos and shit there. So just put it out there. But another way you can support us is to leave us a review in Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast places. Spotify, we've been doing well on Spotify. Everyone's been liking that. Thank you so much. Sonia, we have a new 5-star review?
Yes, we got a 5-star review from JKM_RN. And they gave it 5 stars and said they are subscribed and loving it. And they look forward to every episode. And we super appreciate that because it really helps us find our people on these podcast apps, and it really offsets all the 1-star reviews we get from people who are like, these ladies hurt my feelings, or they don't agree with me exactly, therefore 1 star. They didn't even listen, by the way. They don't even listen. It's ridiculous, but thank you.
But thank you.
Review.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, do we have anything else here? I wish we did.
Or, email us at whatacreeppodcast@gmail. And if you want some stickers, Margot loves to send stickers in the mail. It's her favorite thing to do.
It is.
When it's not 99% humidity in New York. It's her favorite thing to do.
It's 99% humidity also. That's 99. Adding to my grr factor today. Oh, Sonia, we talked about this just a tad off the air.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
Do it.
So we are Gen X.
Yeah.
That's the generation. It's born 1965, and I don't know when it ends, but
80, I think.
Oh, really? Is that
small? 80? Maybe? I don't know. Actually, I really don't know. That's, by the way, it's so Gen X to be like, I don't know.
Exactly. I could look it up, but I'm so tired.
No, but can I ask a question? Do you we were just kids when Reagan was elected. So
right. It was 1980.
Do you remember what you thought about that when you were a kid?
Yes, and we got a great email from someone who we were talking about. You talked about Phyllis Schlafly in our past episode. By the way, we switch back and forth between turns. Right, we take turns. Yeah. And someone had said to me, oh, I wish you'd seen Mrs. America because it was so great. And I said, the trauma of Reagan, because everybody can laugh about that, but I was saying in that show, my mother was an ardent feminist and very, very much into the whole scene. And when the ERA amendment didn't pass, she gave up for a long, long time, a good 20 years. And it always upset me because, that was my mom and I wanted, Anyway, Reagan was someone that was elected in 1980, and my parents were who liked Jimmy Carter fine, I think. I don't know. I was just a kid. But they were oh, it's going to be prosperous. Everyone's going to prosper because of Reagan. And Reagan had that grandfatherly, good-natured, not drunken weirdo nature that we have from 45 who we saw this week. I'm sorry. Right. That was terrifying. Y'all that's almost elder
happening.
Abuse here.
It is. Talk about mental decline. We had a whole thing about the presidential debate here, and Biden didn't look so good, and everyone was this makes me feel bad. Right. I don't think he's up to the task. And these guys are old, by the way.
Right.
He's running because he just wants to stay out of jail. But he did a press conference for over an hour. He just rambled incoherently. He mixes up people's names. He was confusing Willie Brown and Jerry Brown. Very different people.
Yeah, I was going to say.
There's all of that. He doesn't understand when he talks about migrants seeking asylum, it's becoming more and more obvious that he thinks they're coming from
mental asylums.
And that's why he keeps bringing up Hannibal Lecter. That's why he's bringing it up. Because he's not very smart.
Or he's really gone.
He's really gone.
Right.
I found it really disturbing.
So did I. I thought it was funny at first. And then I was oh, this is... Yeah. So speaking of mental asylums, we're talking about mental health today. And we're talking about Ronald Reagan's policies. And
Yes.
so we're going to talk a bit about Reagan. It's like I said, it's a very high overview that I'm doing. There are other podcasts that go very, very deep. And we'll talk about, I did listen to a bunch of them, The Dollop, Behind the Bastards, the other ones, Meet Your Heroes and History Fix all did episodes about Reagan. And they're just hours long. Like after a while, I was like, okay, I need like Real Housewives or the Olympics, something to
Yes.
like...
Yes.
cleanse this timeline, excuse me. But yes, I remember being creeped out by Reagan. I thought he looked creepy, and but once again, I was just a kid.
I was just a kid, and I also thought he looked creepy to me.
Yeah.
Like, I know that, people will say like, we shouldn't look shame people or whatever. I was just a kid. Like, I didn't understand the politics of it.
Right.
But I didn't like the way he looked, and I thought he was creepy. And I was legit disappointed when he won. Like, I was like, ew, that means he's going to be like on TV all the time. And
Right.
like, what? Like, I was not a fan. Again, I was like 8. So what do I know?
Same.
I wasn't like, I disagree with his policies. I was 8. Like,
Fifth grade Margot was like taking the New York Times to school and circling different
by
stories.
the way, a lot of 8-year-olds do know about politics now because
Their parents,
we're living and breathing politics all the time now.
True.
But guess what? Back in the day, I could go whole months without thinking about politics. It's bananas.
You had the local news and the evening news, and my parents
Yes.
read the papers every day. So I did see the papers. I had kind of an idea of what was going on. And, we all had
Yes.
teachers, and they had different,
Yeah.
ways of looking at the world. And your kids and your friends and your parents, your friends of your parents, or your friends' parents and their stuff and your families and stuff like
I
that.
had no idea what was going on. I was just trying not to embarrass myself at school on a daily basis and
Yeah, I mean,
find something to do after school.
you're welcome, everybody. So this is okay. So, all right. The
Let's talk
Mental
about it.
Health Systems Act of 1980 was a significant piece of legislation to improve mental health care in the United States. It was signed into law by President Jimmy Carter. We talked about him as one of our non-creeps a while ago. His first act in office was to give, what's the word I'm thinking of, to Vietnam veterans, amnesty, basically.
Yes.
He pardoned anybody that was, a draft dodger.
Yes.
Because he's like, they don't belong in jail. Right?
Yeah.
It's an unpopular war. They didn't want to fight it. Okay.
Right.
He was a decent man. Still with us, by the way. Like,
Yes.
knocking on
Holding
wood.
on.
Holding on to 100, baby.
Yep.
It was signed into law by President Jimmy Carter on October 7th, 1980, which would mean it was a month before he was voted out of office.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an act that was intended to restructure the federal approach to mental health services, emphasizing community-based care and providing grants to community mental health centers to improve their services. When Ronald Reagan assumed the presidency in January 1981, his first act was to diminish this act. He's like, we just come out of a recession. We need to cut the budget. So we're taking this is all going to be local. There's not going to be any federal involvement in mental health.
Yeah. I mean, screw some of our most vulnerable citizens.
And he has
Who
a
cares? Who
history
cares
of
what
that.
they think? Yes. Yes.
So I
he
just
does.
want to talk some trigger warnings with people. Discussions of previous treatments for mental illness, suicide, sexual assault, and general assholery. Our
That could
sources...
be every episode.
It's honestly... Let me just bring this up. So our... where are we? Okay. Mental Health Systems Act in Wikipedia, San Diego Union Tribune, NPR, the American Library Association, National Library of Medicine, KQED TV, Salon.com, The Hill, New York Times, Psychiatry Online, C-SPAN, Washington Journal, PBS News, Psychiatry News, and Women's History Org. And all those podcasts I mentioned before, and Mother Jones. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is a tough subject because we're in an age now where people openly do talk about mental health and care. That used to be something that people were embarrassed about. I want to bring this to 1988. Did you vote for president in 1988 or no?
I had just turned 18 at the election. So, yes.
Okay.
I voted in 88.
So did I. And I voted for Dukakis.
Same.
Not the most dynamic person.
No, but I felt like it was the lesser of two. I don't even want to use the word evils, but
No.
like that, I felt like that was the better choice. But I also knew he wasn't going to win.
No. No, I mean, and he looked kind of goofy, or they have him in the pit helmet and the thing and the where were we seeing the tank, and he was riding around and he looked ridiculous.
Little silly things like that used to be like the end of your political career. Let's all pour one out for Howard Dean, who has the nerve to like yell funny once at a rally, and we were like, ew, that gives me the ick. Thumbs down.
Or John Kerry was swift-boated. I mean, people just took his experience in Vietnam. He served in Vietnam. He was a rich kid that went to serve, and that was used against him. And I had family members that had books about it.
You didn't serve the way I wanted you to.
He didn't really fight. Oh, okay. President Reagan took a shot. This is Dateline, LA Times Archives, August 3rd, 1988. So this is a couple of months before the election.
Okay.
President Reagan took a shot today at Michael Dukakis for refusing to release his medical records amid rumors of mental depression. Dukakis had a history with with depression, and so did some of his family members. And he was like, "No, I'm not going to talk about that because those, by the way, they are your own business. You don't have to."
That's so private.
It's incredibly
so
private.
Weird.
But we'll talk about Reagan and how he thought about psychiatrists. This is what Reagan said. Look, and this is, by the way, he wasn't running because he had his 2 terms. He was supporting Bush.
Yeah.
H.W. Bush. Blah.
Ugh.
Look, I'm not going to pick on an invalid. He later said he was just trying to be funny, but I don't think I should have said what I said. And Dukakis said, well, occasionally we misspeak, and no apology was really needed. I'm a very healthy guy. It should have been like, fuck you, and the horse you rode in on. But
wow.
Right. That's how he handled it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about mental health care. The first patient admitted to a public hospital, it was the Public Hospital for Persons of Insane and Disordered Minds. I have a very disordered mind myself, so that's in Williamsburg, Virginia. That was in 1773. I want to talk about now 18. I want to thank Mother Jones for this really awesome timeline that's helping me out here. I did a report about this when I was in school. Boston school teacher Dorothea Dix. She was a woman who was a teacher for a while. She was a Catholic, and she had retired, and she had some free time. And so she decided that she was going to read the Bible to women who were in people who were mentally ill.
Yeah.
It was something she was going to do because she really believed it would help. So she goes to this mental institution in East Cambridge. I'm sorry, it was a jail in East Cambridge, and it was for women. And they had a wing for people who were mentally ill. And she went to check it out, and basically the women there barely had clothes on them, didn't have shoes. Like, the cots were a mess. They were treated horribly. They were sexually assaulted. They were abused. Yeah. There was no care. It was just throw them in a place and get it out of our minds.
We put a roof over your head.
Right. And she was like, well, that doesn't seem very Christian or nice. And so she started lobbying lawmakers, and she fought for this until her death in 1887. So the first psychiatric hospitals started in 1880. So with 40 years of her life, that's what she did.
Wow.
Because she was rad. Also, Nellie Bly, I think we've talked about her as a non-creep. She was a reporter, and in New York City, she went around the world And she did it in a very fast amount of time, but it was like all over the globe. Nellie Bly. She was this amazing reporter. She wrote for the New York World. One of the things she did in 1887 was she entered the women's lunatic asylum on New York's Blackwell's Island, and it was 10 days in a madhouse. And she described the conditions. She went into a mental institution in 1887 for 10 days.
That's brave.
I mean, unbelievable. And she wrote about her experience, and people were freaking horrified.
Yes,
and so,
of course they were.
So then they started saying, like, maybe we need a place for people who are ill, and not in a physical sense, like you broke your leg or you have cancer or something like that, or a burn or something. Like, and this is the thing with mental illness. It's like, we're still not even really totally sure what happens. Like, is it chemistry? Is it something you're born with? Is it Maybelline? Sorry, just bad joke there. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe it's trauma, as Jamie Lee Curtis would say. Yes. We don't know, but like, this is infancy of like people like, well, we should treat them decently. This is just being
it's almost
a
like
decent human being.
It's almost like they're humans. They're somebody's mother, brother, sister, wife, child. Like, they're humans. Can we treat them as such?
Exactly. Then, and let's talk about the early 1900s. Wow. In 1907, Indiana was the first of more than 30 states to enact a compulsory sterilization law. It was to prevent the procreation of confirmed criminals, idiots, imbeciles, and rapists. By 1940, over 18,000 people were surgically sterilized. And this is the eugenics law. And eugenics law we'll talk about one day, because that's its own thing. But basically, it's like soon after Darwin did his, talked about, what did he talk about? Darwin I'm sorry. I'm so hot.
Evolution.
I can't. Thank you. His family took that to mean, oh, well, then just get rid of the people that don't meet our standards. So if somebody's warped in some way in my mind, let's just sterilize them or get rid of them, because that's what survival of the fittest. Like, only the best should move forward.
This ties to our episode we did on ugly laws, by the way, y'all.
Right.
So if you want to go back and listen to us talk about what ugly laws were, which sound hilarious. They're ugly, but there's a whole thing behind it. I thought it was a pretty good episode, if I don't say so myself.
It was a great episode, Sonia. You weren't in heat like I am right now. I mean, heat in a bad way, not in a good heat.
No, not that kind of heat, y'all.
No. 1936, Dr. Walter Freeman and his colleague James Watt performed the first prefrontal lobotomy. Whee! Over 50,000 were done by the late 1950s, and this is where they take a chunk of your brain out behind your eyeball, and you're awake when it happens.
Scary. That's really scary.
I told you this was going to be intense. 1938, Italian neurologist Ugo Soletti introduces electroshock therapy as a treatment for people with schizophrenia and other chronic illnesses, mental illnesses. The efficacy of that, some people, it actually helps them. Some people, it doesn't. 1946, President Harry Truman signs the National Mental Health Act. It's a National Institute of Mental Health to conduct research into neuropsychiatric problems. 1954, Big Pharma, SmithKline.
Oh, boy.
They invented Thorazine. Thorazine was a drug that would basically knock out a horse in heat. It's strong. And people decided, and some people, and this is such a complicated issue. Some people do get violent, and they are a harm to themselves or other people. And so they're just desperately trying to find ways. What's a quick way to do that? What's the easiest thing? Take a pill or give somebody a pill. By 1955, the number of mentally ill people in public psychiatric hospitals peaks at 560,000. 500,000 people. In 1962, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey was published. That's when it was a work of fiction, but it did mirror some things that were really happening at veterans hospitals around the world, around the country, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, something could be fiction and still be true.
Exactly. 1963, John F. Kennedy signs the Community Mental Health Act, this is his last act before he was assassinated. 1965, Medicaid is passed, one of the most popular programs ever introduced. It's a socialist program that we have in America that the boomers love.
Socialism, boo.
That boomers love, and they hate taxes, and they want to kick the rug out of the rest of us when it's our turn. But
ladder kickers.
If you're 65 and over, there you go. 1967, the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. So this made, and this, once again, complicated issues. It made involuntary hospitalization of mentally ill people difficult. This is important because people were thrown into mental institutions for just being difficult.
Different. Yes.
Or you were a protester, or you were somebody that was disruptive to other people. Women were thrown in there. People of color were thrown in there. People who were just quirky were thrown in there. Homosexuals were thrown. I mean, people would get thrown into these institutions. It became very easy thing for people to just put them in an So I understand why people, you want to have a system where somebody can say, no, I'm okay. I don't want to go there. Thank you very much.
Right.
So I understand that. But 1 year after that law goes into effect, the number of mentally ill people in the criminal justice system doubles. 1977, 650 community health facilities are serving 1.9 million mentally ill patients a year. 1980, Jimmy Carter signs the Mental Health Systems Act. This was also encouraged by his wife, Rosalind, who often visited mental hospitals to help people, by the way, to look for solutions, not to gawk.
Yes.
1981, federal mental health spending decreases by 30% because the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which repealed community health legislation set by Carter because Reagan won and fuck all y'all. I know how that feels.
Yeah.
In 1984, an Ohio-based study says that 30% of the homeless population was suffering from a serious mental health illness. 1985, the federal government drops 11% of their community health funding. 1990, clozapine was an antipsychiatric drug that was approved to treat schizophrenia. 2004, a national study was conducted that found that roughly that 16% of prison and jail inmates are seriously ill, which would be about 300,000 people.
Yeah.
And that means there are more than three times as many seriously mentally ill people in jails and prisons than in hospitals.
Well, they put them in prison because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Right.
When they cut funding, it doesn't mean, they shut down a lot of places and these people had nowhere to go. They had nowhere to put them. And so you saw an increase in homelessness.
Yes.
And then they start arresting people for being homeless or disruptive and now they're in jail where they're not getting any help. They're just getting worse. And it's just cyclical. It just keeps going and going and going. And we're still struggling with this today.
Exactly.
What we're doing is not working.
It's not working. And then here we are today, and this is 2010 is the last time I have a statistic for you, but it's 43,000. There are 43,000 psychiatric beds in the United States, or about 14 beds per 100,000 people, which is the same ratio it was in 1850 when Dorothea Dix was.
Damn.
Yeah. So we're back to that. We're going backwards.
We're going backwards.
So there's two presidents I want to really focus on. Three, excuse me, I guess. We'll include Carter, but I want to talk about John Kennedy and Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Reagan, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Boo. He was the 40th president of the United States between 81 and 89. He was born February 6, 1911, an Aquarius. And he was born in excuse me, his father moved a lot. So his father was a shoe salesman, and his father was also an alcoholic. So the dad, and very, very charming. He would spend all of his money at the bars and the pubs and things like that. So they moved quite a bit. Reagan's mother was super religious. So she was the one who was very pious, and she sort of taught him. He was born in Tampico, Illinois, whatever.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Yeah. So Reagan had a father, like I said, Reagan was sort of a middling student, but he was very athletic, and he had a lot of charm about him. He was in all the sports. He was in plays. He was a cheerleader. He was really into radio when radio became big. He was a radio announcer. His first job in radio was in Chicago. And basically, he had the job of after 3 p.m. when the papers had hit the print, he would go out and yell out baseball scores basically to people. Huh. Because the paper was already printed. So So people started hanging out because he had this really great voice. Can you talk about an easier, better job than that? I think that would be just so much fucking fun. So Reagan had a very dim view of psychiatry because he thought it was related to communism. If there's anything he hated more than anything in the world, he hated communism. He thought it was the root of all evil everywhere. So this is what motivates him as an adult. Not much of a churchgoer. I mean, he goes, but whatever. Not much of a student. Not much of a hard worker, really. He goes by on charm, but he's really, really anti-communist. And so people confuse communism with socialism, with Marxism, like all of it gets kind of mushed together. His father dies, and he and his first wife, Jane Wyman, they help take care of his mother together. His wife was Jane Wyman. They were married from 1940 to 1949. She was in Falcon Crest, I believe. She's in a bunch of movies, and he started acting after college, and he did fine. I mean, we would call him, I guess, like they said in other podcasts, like he's a B actor. He was never like a big time movie star.
Yeah, he wasn't like a B actor is probably a great way to describe it. The big thing was, from what I understand, he was from the same small town as one of the gossip writers. I forget which one. And so she kind of took him under her wing, and she made him sound like he's an A-lister, and she would write about him all the time. And
oh my God.
But he wasn't that. Like he made movies that people liked, but he wasn't like a Humphrey Bogart or a Clark Gable. He wasn't up there. He was just, he's fine. He's fine. I'm trying to think of an equivalent.
I'm trying to think of the equivalent too. I mean, he just was always...
It would be like a Patrick Wilson or a Josh Lucas or a... see, you're like, who's that? Exactly.
I know who they are, but I wouldn't even describe... No, because they're good actors. He's not a good actor.
Yeah, that's true. He kind of always was playing himself.
Yeah, he played a version of Newt Rock. I know. I'm trying to think of who played... Think about that while I continue.
Yeah.
So he's on the scene. He's attractive-ish. I don't know. He's tall. He's muscular. He's gabby as fuck. I mean, he could just talk. His favorite thing was to read the Reader's Digest and then tell people what he just read. You know those people? I just read a thing. James Garner, the wonderful actor, was friends with Reagan.
Love James Garner.
He was amazing. He was good friends with Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. Like, they knew each other from SAG and things like that. And he said Ronald Reagan never had an original idea in his life. Like, not even one. Jane Wyman...
From Reader's Digest.
Jane Wyman said... Jane Wyman had like a love-hate relationship with Reagan. Like, she did... This is not funny. They were dating... And he was playing around on her. And he was having an affair with a woman named Christine while he was dating hardcore Jane Wyman. Jane Wyman was an actor on the rise. Jane Wyman would win Academy Awards. Jane Wyman would have a long acting career.
Yes, and that gossip columnist kind of wanted Reagan and Jane Wyman to be a thing because that would put him in a different level. So it was kind of like a celebrity like matchmaking thing which was super common back then, by the way.
I think it's common now.
So he could like
I'm thinking of a couch jumper, not a couch humper, but a couch jumper.
Yes.
Ayo. When Reagan was dating her in the late 30s, she was an arch Republican, by the way, conservative. She grew up with that. Her father was in the John Birch Society. By the way, my grandfather, my mother's father, was in the John Birch Society. Mm-hmm. They're fucking wackos. They're not. Yep. These are not fun people to hang out with.
Nope.
So she was with him on no communism and all that stuff. Ron Reagan, they were dating. He's in the movies occasionally. Never writes anything or directs or anything, which is fine. He's just good at what he's good. He's a personality, a presenter, maybe, like our European friends would say. He's a presenter. Yes. That was what he was really good at. They're dating, and he's having an affair with a woman named Christine, was also an actress, never became famous. And if you read Kitty Kelly's book about Nancy Reagan, which I read years ago, and it's delicious and great. And Nancy Reagan is definitely on my list one day because she's a fucking asshole.
Yes, she is.
Peace.
She's an asshole, rest in peace.
Jane Wyman, very attractive, great actress. She's dating Ronald Reagan. And he very much was like, I don't want to get married. That's good. I don't need the ball and chain, blah, blah, blah. That whiny dude thing.
Yeah.
So he's sleeping around on Jane Wyman. And this one woman, Christine, they were dating. And then one night, she said he was very forceful and he forced himself on her. And when she said, hey, that wasn't cool, he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I just couldn't help myself. You're so beautiful and sexy. She became pregnant. He said, it's not mine. You can't, wasn't me. Can't prove it. And left her. So she had to then find someone to help her get an abortion. He knew she got an abortion, by the way. Didn't care.
Yeah, because they're only pro-life when it's someone else.
Exactly.
Yes.
At the same time, he's dating Jane Wyman, and she's super upset that he's sleeping around, and he's lying to her about it. So he's gaslighting her, saying, you're crazy. What are you even talking about, Jane? Yeah. Jane threatened suicide and took a bunch of pills.
Oh,
I know. She went to the hospital, and he was like, oh, sorry about that. I'll marry you now. She married him.
Girl.
They had 3 kids together. Pretty soon after they got married, America goes into World War II. And Reagan had 2 deferments and then was called up. And then there were many duties you could have in the war. Ronald Reagan was based in Los Angeles, in Southern California, and he worked for the movie industry. So he did a lot of reels. He did a lot of propaganda.
Yes.
He was the face of war bonds and fighting tyranny over the globe and supporting our men and women in the armed forces, yada, yada, yada. He didn't serve overseas. Yeah. He served.
He was no Jimmy Stewart. Like Jimmy Stewart was a legit hero, who flew overseas, flew planes,
He was older and he had physical stuff. He was too skinny. Yeah. He had to what a problem. But he had to gain weight to join. But he did it because he was absolutely, Henry fought a lot of people.
Yeah. But he served. He did it. He did what he was asked to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get your whatever, dude. Okay. So while he's doing that and he's based in the States, he had heard that men that served in World War I, when they came back, the time that they were serving overseas, they were told by the government, which doesn't happen anymore, they were told you don't have to pay taxes. Sorry you got the flu and sorry about all the psychic damage you have from being in a war where they threw tear gas in your face and was like one of the horrible experience.
Sorry you lost a limb.
Or you lost all your friends or whatever. Yeah. But you don't have to pay taxes for the time you're gone. Reagan was really pissed because he had to pay taxes. And that's when he really got into this isn't fair. The guy's making a mint. He's working in Hollywood during World War II.
So fucking selfish.
Fuck you.
So selfish. These rich assholes who are like, oh, fuck off with this shit.
How are we going to pay? And this is another thing, and it is an important thing to say. How are you going to pay for things? It's easy for me to say, that's a problem. Let's throw some money at it. Of course. And it's hard to find the money. You know, what do you invest your money in? How is it best used? And with mental health, we're like, do we just put them in a cleaner place and have them in a place where they have sunshine and go for walks? Do we give them drugs? Do we try therapy? What kind of therapy? What, you know, we still don't know what the exact thing to do is, but it's better than fucking nothing as far as I'm concerned.
True dat.
Anyway, so he's married to Jane Wyman and they have 3 kids together. Maureen, Michael, Patty, Ron, and I'm sorry, there's there's Ron Reagan Jr. Yeah, Ron Reagan Jr.
Yeah.
Michael Reagan is okay. And they had one that passed away. It was she had a premature birth, and unfortunately, and he was still screwing around with Christine, by the way, at this time.
Nice. Why would she continue to screw around with him? But whatever.
In 1949, he and Jane Wyman get divorced because she's like, this guy's a loser. He's
also like,
his career's over.
She's still on the rise. Like,
she's ascending still.
Yeah.
She's going to have a long career ahead of her. She loved acting. She loved, and as much as she hated communism, she was still friends with people. Like, she knew she had enough emotional intelligence to know that it's, especially if you're in a show business career, you're going to meet people who probably have different values than you. So maybe you figure out.
He was going to drag her down.
He was dragging her down. He wasn't talented. Yeah. He wasn't particularly ambitious. He wanted things, but he didn't want to work for things. So his whole thing was just, constantly networking and making new friends and inroads and blah, blah, blah. Right. So he was super pissed that after World War II that all these people came back and they got all the roles and he didn't get them. He worked in TV. He worked in radio. GE hired him to read speeches, and they would play these speeches. He would record speeches. They would sell the records, and then they'd play these records at Legion halls around the country. And it was all about communism, and all your friends are communists. And he worked with the FBI to be a snitch for anybody that went to communist rallies or had any communist sympathies. Now, you have to understand a thing. In America, before World War II especially, people were interested in other ideas because we were in the Great Depression. Yeah. So, we had the New Deal. He hated the New Deal, by the way. He fucking hated FDR and the New Deal because...
Of course he did.
Yeah. So he's always about... I'm going to barf in my mouth. Rugged individualism and pulling yourself by your bootstraps. There's no one gets a free ride. You have to just...
still like such a GOP talking point.
To this
always
day.
By people who didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps, inherited all their fucking wealth. You didn't work for shit.
Yeah.
You were handed things.
And you always made more money every time you went someplace else. Like, that's all normal to you. And it seems like it should be that way. But believe it or not, it's not that way for everybody. And it's so fucking infuriating. So he was a snitch for the FBI. He volunteered for the HUAC hearings, the House of Un-American Activities. He was fine with all of them. So he divorces Jane Wyman and he starts dating a lady, Nancy Davis, who was an actress, very pretty. Crudely, people said she was the blowjob queen of Hollywood. I say good on her. It doesn't get you pregnant, and
hey, they call it a job for a reason.
Exactly, and
it's hard work, man. That's hard work.
And maybe she loved it.
Maybe. Hey, you do you, boo. I don't want to. No judgment here.
No.
Knock yourself out.
Go for it. But she was also an ardent anti-communist. And she, unlike Reagan, my favorite Jane Wyman quote. Jane Wyman said at a dinner party when she's had a few. So it was like, oh, what's it like to be with Ron? She's like, ugh. You ask him what time it is, he'll tell you how to make a watch.
He sounds fun.
That's the level of charm he had.
Like, ugh.
Yeah. And they had adopted son too in the middle of everything. But he's still like, as soon as he was with Nancy Reagan and they were married in 1952, Nancy told him that they weren't going to visit with his kids anymore. So
fucked up.
she said, if they stay with us, it can only be on the weekends and they have to stay in a boarding school during the week. Yeah.
Damn. So she needed him to kind of pretend that what happened before didn't really happen.
Exactly.
Okay.
He cheated
Cool.
on Nancy, by the way, quite a bit.
Of course he did.
But
She probably cheated on him too, by the way.
I hope she did. I hope she gave all of his friends a blowjob. Every one. I should say this, by the way. His years of service, I'm looking at Wiki right now, 1937 to 1942, and then 42 to 45.
Okay.
And he was at the rank of captain. So, okay. In
Yeah, fine.
Hollywood, but okay.
Yeah, it's more than I'm going to do.
It's more than I've ever done, for sure. And my dad was a draft dodger, by the way.
My dad actually, he served, he never was sent to Vietnam, but he worked as military police.
Oh, I get it. He gets a gun.
Yeah.
And he's an authoritarian.
Yeah. He loved it.
Oh,
yeah. Most recently, he brought out his like military boxes at Thanksgiving, and we looked at like, he worked, on the army base, and there was a lot of like drunk driving and stuff like that. And he had all kinds of like copies of photos and reports, and we were all looking at it. We were like, so dad to be military police.
So Reagan and Nancy, he's making some money with GE, and then he gets TV money. He gets a couple of TV shows, and he's doing really well. He's making
he's on
decent
all
coin.
those game shows.
Yes.
All those game shows that were on in the 50s.
And he's also doing a lot of speeches about anti-communism, which was very popular in the 50s. Roy Cohn was one of his friends. Roy Cohn, excuse me, which we did a whole episode on Roy Cohn.
Yeah,
who was also
that's
good
one of
friends
my
with
faves.
number 45. That's one of my faves, too. So Reagan in the 60s. So let's go out of the 50s. They have a couple of kids together, not very particularly close to them. Ron and Patty and Michael. Michael became a radio host, and Ron was a dancer. Remember that?
I remember, didn't he go on Saturday Night Live?
Yes,
once?
he hosted.
And he did the whole like risky business thing, and people lost their shit. Like,
it was so disrespectful. How dare you?
It's so tame. Tame. And everyone clutching their pearl. Huh?
And it was on at like 11:30 at night on a Saturday.
I was like, it was so ridiculous.
It was so stupid. So let's go to the 60s. Reagan has he has kids with Nancy. He has his kids with Jane. He doesn't really see them very much. He then, in the 60s, he goes from working, he's, by the way, the president of SAG for a while. And that's the Screen Actors Guild. And he was a registered Democrat for many, 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 many years. Your dad was too, right? You were telling me off the air he used to be, and then he became, that my parents were Reaganites, Reagan Republicans. So he had friends that said, and he cut a deal with SAG for actors because these movies were now, TV's becoming popular. So in the middle of the day, to set up content, they started buying old movies and just playing them over and over again. And these older actors that are in these movies and seeing them on TV, they're like, where's my check? Like, you're supposed to pay me. That's in my contract. And so Ronald Reagan was on the Screen Actors Guild when he was the president, helped negotiate that deal. Now, what he didn't say, what people didn't talk about, was that he only said it for a very short window of time as far as the years were concerned. For the much older actors, they didn't get shit. And also, he was working with MCA, which was an agency. And so he was working out a deal so MCA could work with everybody and not have to pay any issues. He was in on that. And then he said peace out. I'm going to work on the business side from now on. Screen Actors Guild. See you later.
Yeah.
And he becomes a Republican. He realizes like those are the people, and they're sniffing around. The Republicans.
Yeah.
And JFK. Let me go back a little bit with JFK.
Also, Nancy's family was super Republican.
Oh, she was very conservative, and she.
Yes.
And let me say this: she loved hearing Ronnie talk. He never could talk enough for her. She was completely besotted with him.
Yes.
He fucked around on her once again. And he called her mommy, which is very strange.
So gross.
I find that
so gross.
Hideous.
Yeah,
so
and then she
gross.
asks him for the time, and he tells her how a watch is made, and she's like, "Oh, tell me more." Like, ugh.
My dad sold hats. Oh, really? Like loafers?
Yeah.
No shoes. Her shoes. Sorry.
Yeah,
His dad
but
sold shoes.
Her family was really, from what I understand, very, very conservative, and she was very conservative, and that definitely rubbed off. He was already conservative, and it like rubbed off on him even more.
She encouraged it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She absolutely encouraged it. Now let's go. We're here in the mid-century. Let's go back a little bit to 1918 when Rosemary Kennedy was born. She and JFK were very close. They were very close in age. Rosemary was born. Rosemary had. I'm not going to use the R word because but it's which we don't use now. That's considered a slur. Mm-hmm. She had intellectual disabilities.
Yes,
and her father, Joseph Kennedy, who will definitely be an episode one day because I have some stories about him because he was really into horses, and my grandfather worked for the Rockefellers on Long Island, working on their horses, stables and shit. So I have some stories. But anyway, I know we got to get this going. So Rosemary was very bubbly, very pretty. She was the prettiest of all the Kennedy daughters, but she had intellectual disabilities. She basically, by the time she was 18, she was on the intellectual level of like a 10-year-old. But like I said, really cute and sweet. They all absolutely adored her. But Joe Kennedy had an idea of like how he wanted his kids to be. He was very narcissistic. He was very controlling. His father was an alcoholic, so he never drank. He had very high ideals. Like Joe Kennedy Jr. was supposed to be the president one day, and he told them that, like, you're going to be, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Rosemary, like I said, was intellectually disabled, so Rosemary went to convents, which is like they didn't want to send her to a mental health institution because they didn't have good ones then, or they didn't have one that they cared. A hospital run by nuns, and there's 4 of them on the payroll to take care of her 24/7.
Wow.
And she, like I said, she's pretty, she's vivacious, people love talking to her, she's just like a light. Around 18 or 19, she's changing. First of all, she's developing as a woman. Developing as a woman. She's once again really pretty. Like if you look compared to the other Kennedy girls, like she really. Some of them, Eunice. Some of them. But anyway, they think she starts sneaking out of the hospital. She starts sneaking away, and she's meeting up with men, and they think she's having sex. And instead of talking to her about sex, or because nobody did that then, they brought her home to Massachusetts, and then Rosemary would get into arguments with people. All of a sudden she was getting angrier and angrier, and gradually she was becoming very combative. She didn't like to be told what to do. She didn't like to be like, I don't want to stay in this room, I'm going to stay in that room. I'm not going to have steak for dinner, I'm going to have chicken. And she would just get very angry and throw things and get into fights and shit like that. And they were getting very worried about her. So then she was sent to a mental health facility. And by the 40s, 50s, that's where she is. And Joe Kennedy told the other kids, Rosemary's someplace, she's being taken care of, don't worry about her. The boys are fighting in World War II. He's an ambassador in England. He takes Rosemary with him, but Rosemary's in a program in a hospital in England. So she's separated from the other kids. And then Rosemary is then sent to a place in Wisconsin, and she's staying in a hospital there after the war. And even there, they're having a hard time with her. Like, and the family's getting calls all the time. Rosemary's combative. Rosemary's getting angry. Rosemary had a fight with somebody. We can't control her. And so that's when they were sold the idea of a lobotomy. And they were shown movies, short clips. They had these informational things shown to the family about this is a new procedure and it'll really help Rosemary. Because she's now in her 40s and she's just,
right.
It's getting really bad.
Well, and it's scary and we trust our
scary.
doctors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So her family, they get the lobotomy and it's a botched job and they took out way too much. And Rosemary lost her ability to speak. She lost her ability to do basic things for herself, like go to the bathroom, shower.
Awful. Oh,
so
what a nightmare.
She was institutionalized. And so she had till she died, which was only like not that long ago. She lived to be, I think, in her 90s. She was institutionalized and they were not. And the thing was, she lived to be in 2005. She lived to be 86. The kids weren't told about her. They weren't allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
So John Kennedy, when he was running for president, had this sister and was told, don't talk about her to anybody, to the press, because if anybody knew, that would harm him. And Kennedy was broken
bananas
because he loved her, and he was like, "What?
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, let it out there. Let people know."
Also, like that, it's like, how would that possibly? Well, we know how it would harm him because some people
Michael
are the
Dukakis.
worst. But, yeah, exactly, are the worst. But like, also, it just shows like, hey, we all go through things.
Exactly.
We all have people in our life who are struggling and we are all going through the same things together, and it's not
a shame.
It shouldn't be a shame. Exactly.
So Kennedy, and he went and visited Rosemary when he was running for president, and he took a detour to visit with her, and then he called his father. He was furious, like, why can't I talk to her? And it was a big thing in the family. So when Kennedy became president, he really worked on creating a system so that we could start helping people. So that's why one of his last acts was to create that mental health care plan, because he was thinking of Rosemary. So that happens in 63. He's killed in 63 or 4? 63, November of 63.
Yeah, 63.
And so then this is like the last act. But within 15 years, it's forgotten about. They just don't want to put money into it. And it's becoming more and more like, the states, is it a state issue? Is it a county issue? Is it a federal issue? When does it become what? By the time we're going into the late 60s now, Ronald Reagan is the governor of California. And he and Nancy moved to Sacramento into the mansion there. And Nancy walked into the governor's mansion and turned to the wife, the former First Lady of California, and first she wanted her to leave early so they could decorate. And they're like, okay, how much time do you need? So Nancy came by to check out the house first. And the woman said, we really loved living here. And she told her, yeah, I don't believe that. She hated the house. She thought it was ugly. She thought it was dull. She thought, because she's used to Hollywood, Sacramento of 19. I know she's a total C word. So she's a cunt. So she's a cunt. So anyway, Nancy and Ronald wound up convincing the state of California to buy them a mansion in Sacramento that met their needs, not move into that mansion, and at the same time cut all these programs for the state.
Up. Could you? Oh my god! Like,
yeah,
that is 100% shit that Trump would do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Abso-fucking-lutely. So
I was horrified when Trump and Melania moved into the White House. I was like, they're going to fuck that place up. They're going to fuck it up.
And they did.
Like, yeah.
What they did to the garden? Look up the White House garden, Melania Trump. It's devastating. Or the first Christmas at the White House with Melania.
Oh my God. It looked like the fucking Handmaid's Tale in there. Like, what a nightmare. They are nasty people.
So one of Reagan's things as a governor was to cut programs for mental health because he didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
He served 2 terms as governor. By this time, he had about $4 million in 1976, which is a lot of money in 1976. Mm-hmm. And he has friends that convince him to run for president. He was a big Nixon supporter. He thought Nixon was treated most unfairly. We will do Richard Nixon one day.
We definitely will.
And then he loses. And then he runs again in 1979. And 1979 America is rough. The inflation is high. Unemployment is high. Gas prices, like people bitch about it now.
Yeah.
People had to wait in line for gas. Or you look, or they had, it's depending on where you lived in America, but sometimes it was by your license plate. Like if it ended with an even number, you could only do it on these days. And it was a whole thing. We had hostages taken in Iran. America's not feeling great about itself.
No, we were in a bad space, and Jimmy Carter inherited kind of a mess, and things only got worse.
Right. And his whole thing, see if you can handle this, y'all, was compassion. He led with compassion. He said things like, he gave an interview with Playboy and said, I've committed adultery in my heart many times, which is fine. It's, or his mind.
My heart.
His heart or his mind, whatever. He didn't fuck around.
I was committing adultery in my heart all the time. Yeah. So silly.
It's a silly thing to be, but he had a brother that was an alcoholic. Billy Beer, remember that?
And everyone was ashamed, by the way. It was like a check next to Jimmy Carter's name because his brother was an alcoholic. It's, again, like no compassion, no empathy.
Right. He had compassion. He had empathy. And one of the things he did with Rosalind was to create this mental health act, which Ronald Reagan got rid of the second he was in the fucking White House. And I'll finish it off with, hold on a second, sorry. Document Ronald Reagan. This is what he did, the key points about his influence. He repealed the Mental Health Systems Act. He shifted to block grants for mental health services. He did a complete reduction in federal spending for mental health care. The impact on community health centers is they lost their funding. So community centers were closed left and right, and a lot of people were sent out of hospitals and just into the streets because it was decided it's not a federal problem. You have a homeless person in New York City takes care of it, or New York State. It's not America's problem. And I understand why people might think that way, but they're all citizens and we're all citizens of the world, I guess. But I mean, we're all...
Imagine not caring.
No.
Like just being like...
Yeah.
That sounds like a California problem. Like, it's so fucked up. Like, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. That's not what we're supposed to be for. Like, I love that people will say things like that and then also lose their shit for the Olympics. And it's like, you can't have both. Like, you're going to be super proud of like someone who's from Massachusetts and winning a gold, but then you don't care about Massachusetts problems.
Right.
Like, I don't know if that makes sense if I'm translating I don't know if I'm explaining very well what I'm trying to say.
Well, you only want to
here.
see the pretty things. You don't want to know about anything that's unpretty. And that's going to bum you out. And that's a moral failing on that person. So that's not my problem.
Yeah.
And I have no respect for that point of view. And I don't pretend to. And I don't have patience for it. And I'm fucking tired of it. And when people say stupid shit, I call them out.
Yeah. And when Reagan did what he did, like that impact is still today.
Yes.
It's like the mental health like all the different centers and hospitals and all that. I feel like they're still trying to catch up from what he did like 40 years ago. Like, I feel like we would have made more progress if that had never happened.
Well, we were doing that. We were trying to figure out what the answers were because people were actively looking for answers. And then we decided, it's too complicated.
Yeah, that's too hard. Forget it.
Let's just decide it's up to the family to fucking deal with it. And wherever they have to deal with, fine. And if you're poor, too fucking bad. You know, we can't...
Well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps then.
Right.
It's so fucking shitty.
It's terrible. And so I want to finish with Ronald Reagan dies. Finally, he leaves. He's starting to get, and we'll do a. Sonia's going to talk about his AIDS years.
Yeah. Yeah. His AIDS year. There might be, maybe I could lump in a couple of different creepy things Reagan did. But
Yes.
I'll definitely get into how he handled the AIDS crisis because it was such a fucking failure. Like, it's upsetting. Y'all are going to get upset.
Reagan had, I mean, and by the way, people always said things like he needed naps, that's fine. I like naps too, but that he had a lot of gaffes, like in things that he said, and his apologies were always like non-apologies, like, yeah, I was kidding. Yeah. Who cares? It's a loser. Who cares? I mean, he did it a little more charming than Trump. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, what do you think that their campaign slogan was in 1979? Him and George Bush.
Wasn't it Make America Great Again?
Let's make America great again.
Great again. See, Trump doesn't have any original fucking ideas. None. And he was older when he ran for president. And so by the time he was president in his second term, people were talking about he's not all there. And everyone's like, no, he's fine. Nothing was wrong. It turns out he had Alzheimer's. And that's what he died of eventually in 2004. Right.
And that's all I've got for you today for Ronald Reagan. I'm sorry, it's a meandering history of 20th century mental health. But
I think you did a great job. And I look forward to picking up what you put down in our next episode, because what a fucking creep.
It's so much creepiness to have in front of us.
Yeah.
All right, Sonia.
You want to hear about someone who's not a creep?
Yes, please.
Okay, this person was nominated countless times in our What a Creep group. So I have to talk about Governor Tim Walz. Do you know who he is?
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Okay. If you don't know, he was just this week, it feels like it was a lifetime ago, was chosen as Kamala Harris's running mate. He's going to be VP. He's going to be VP. He's going to be the vice president. But right now, he is the governor of Minnesota. So I thought we would talk about some of the non-creepy things about him. But first, a little history. Timothy James Walz was born April 6, 1964 in West Point, Nebraska.
April 6th?
April 6th.
He's an Aries.
He's an Aries. He is a former school teacher and a high school football coach.
Not very American.
Not American at all. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. No big deal. He was a member of the House of Representatives from 2007 to 2019. He was a ranking member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee for 2 years while he was in there, and he's been the governor of Minnesota since 2019. So here's some non-creepy things about him. He spent a year teaching English in China. After college. China. And now like Fox News is like, why was he going to China so much? He was working, assholes. He was teaching English in China. He traveled to China multiple times as part of like the first government sanctioned group of American educators to go teach in the Chinese high schools. That's what he's doing there. He's not the fucking Manchurian Candidate. He also taught on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota while he was governor. Y'all are going to love this. So many good things he's done in a short period of time, by the way.
Just a few years.
He signed a $2.3 billion education budget into law, the single largest investment in public education in the state's history. They provided free breakfast and lunch at schools. So none of that like shit where kids don't get to eat. Because by the way, like, why are we not feeding our kids? Y'all say you're pro kid, you're pro family. Why are we not feeding kids? It makes it easier for them to learn when they're not hungry.
It's not a cost heavy program. It really isn't. And the benefits from it are incredible.
Yes. He increased like pre-K, like size, more opportunities for people to put their kids in like pre-K programs, which saves people on a lot of like childcare costs, by the way, because that shit gets expensive. And he expanded mental health resources for students. He made all kinds of investments in improving like child literacy programs. What? Investing in education? What a monster. Last year, he signed something called the PRO Act. It's the Protect Reproductive Options Act. It was one of the, like, immediately when Roe was overturned, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, he like put it in their like state constitution that abortion was a fundamental right. He increased access to birth control, to fertility treatments, other reproductive health care. Again, first to codify abortion rights in their country, in their state constitution. Thank you. I was getting there. He signed the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act that shielded like women and anyone who provided abortions from like other state
like
laws.
in Texas, where they have a high infant mortality rate now because of that fucking creep, who's on our list, by the way.
Yes, he's on our list. We're waiting for him to like lose his election and not be in power anymore, because he does creepy things every day. We would have to update constantly. Tim Walz and his wife Gwen, by the way, they met when they were both high school teachers. They shared a classroom that had one of those dividers in the wall.
Oh,
isn't that adorable?
That's
and
a
she
me
used
cute.
to complain because he was so loud that she could like hear him. And they went on a date and they like went to the movies and they like went to Hardee's afterwards. And like I was like, oh my God, it's like the cutest thing ever. Both of their children were through IVF, so they're very protective of that, and they take those threats to IVF very seriously. Which again, I can't believe that's a thing in this country. They have 2 children. One is named Hope and one is named Gus. And I shared this recently. Actually, I don't think I shared it in the What a Creep group. I think I might have just posted it on Facebook in general. There was a whole People magazine article about his son, Gus, who's 17. He has a nonverbal learning disorder, and he has ADHD and he has anxiety. And like, as someone who also has like an autistic son, like I love the interview that they gave, and he said, like so many American families, it took us time to figure out how to make sure we did everything we could to make sure Gus would be set up for success while he was growing up.
Oh, and
I was like, this is what I do all the time.
Right.
I'm like, I want Calvin to be Calvin. He says it took time, but what became immediately clear to us was that Gus's condition is not a setback; it's his secret power. Oh. And I'm crying because this is how I talk about Calvin all the time. Calvin is never my burden. Like Calvin is special, and like I love Calvin's outlook on life, and
he's such a great kid.
This just touched my heart. But I have like more awesome shit, so I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to wipe this away. Okay. They established protections for trans people and gender affirming care in Minnesota. He banned conversion therapy, by the way. That's so fucked up. When he was a high school teacher, he was the faculty advisor for the school's first Gay Street Alliance. Big deal, because he was the football coach.
Right.
And
they served in the military.
Yes. Like, and they were like, we would feel protected and safe to have him. That's the kind of teacher he was.
I want to say a joke that I saw on Twitter or one of the social medias. Tim Walz is the guy that asks you if you're okay at a bar because he notices a creepy guy hitting on you. And JD Vance is the creepy guy hitting on you.
100%.
Walz is the guy who's like, can I walk you to your car? And you feel like 100%. I'll be fine.
Yeah, and JD Vance is the guy that like you put your keys in that special way.
Yeah.
To like
or you have to have
people.
your hand over your drink the whole fucking time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gross. He said this a few times, and he said it again recently. When someone else is given basic rights, others don't lose theirs. We aren't cutting a pie here. We're giving basic rights to every single Minnesotan. Like, he's such a good person. He took a lot of action against gun violence. He was someone who he had an A rating from the National Rifle Association.
Right.
And he took, he's always been Democrat, by the way, but they gave him an A rating, and he was on a list, like Guns and Ammo would like put him on their list of like great politicians for gun owners and stuff like that. But then after all the school shootings, and his daughter said something to him, and he's like, "You're right, I'm not doing this." And he denounced the NRA. He supports gun control legislations. All the money the NRA donated to him, he donated it to other things outside of that. So shortly after the shooting that was in Vegas in 2017, which killed 59 people, by the way, he donated money to a nonprofit that supported the family of military members who died or were wounded. Like, he gets an F from the NRA now, by the way, and he's like, "I sleep just fine."
Yeah.
That's what he said. What else did they do? They established paid sick leave in Minnesota. They ensured paid sick days. They banned non-compete agreements. They increased protections for workers in warehouses, construction sites, hospitals, nursing homes, and public schools. He signed the largest monster. He signed the largest infrastructure bill in Minnesota history so that they could rebuild their roads and bridges and fire stations. They upgraded veterans homes, they're also replacing all their lead pipes across the state. Thinking about moving to Minnesota, y'all.
Yeah, no shit. It gets cold there, though, from what I hear.
Yeah, no, it gets real cold. Actually, my boss, Nina, lives in Minnesota, and I've been to Minnesota.
Yeah, you have.
It's like, I went when it was like -6 degrees. I was like, holy shit, it's fucking cold. So Californian. He signed the largest expansion of voting rights in Minnesota. He restored voting rights to 55,000 formerly imprisoned people. He made it so 16 and 17-year-olds are pre-registered to vote. So when they hit 18, they're ready to go. He he created permanent absentee voting status, automatic voter registration. He's making it easier for people to vote, which is what you should do, which is why the GOP is against it, because they want less people to vote. He has lowered the cost of prescription drugs in Minnesota, including put an insulin cap, like one of those caps on insulin, which is one of the most expensive drugs.
Every single Republican voted against it, by the way, including J.D. Vance.
They fucking suck.
Yeah.
He legalized cannabis. He expunged all the records of people that had cannabis convictions. Let's see what else. He's helped Minnesotans recover from medical debt. He's banning medical debt from impacting credit scores, preventing medical providers from withholding necessary medical care due to unpaid debt, eliminating automatic transfers of medical debt to patient spouses when they pass away. And he did this because his father passed away when Waltz was 19. His dad got lung cancer and passed away. Fuck cancer.
Yeah.
And his mom inherited that debt, and she had to go back to work to work off the debt.
Ugh.
And that's why he did that. And recently he's been on, by the way, he's also the one who started the whole, the GOP's weird. Y'all are weird. Why do you fucking care about what bathrooms people are using? And why do you care if people get IVF? And why is that your business? And he is
openly
mind your
just
own
says,
damn weird.
Mind your own damn business,
Yes.
and these people are weird.
Yeah, and that's the shit that's working. By the way, they're all losing their fucking minds
They
over
can't
there
handle
because
it.
they hate that they're being called weird. They're losing it. It's hilarious.
Because
I love
Gen
it so
Xers,
much.
by the way, that's 1965 to 1980,
Okay.
according to Wikipedia. That could be
Okay.
wrong, but he's Gen X. That's something yeah.
Yeah, you're being a fucking weirdo. So he did an interview recently, and he was described as a progressive, by the way, like it's a bad thing. And he said,
everyone says that.
this is his quote, "What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can learn, and women are making their own healthcare decisions, and we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness." So, and I think this is important. his tater tot dish, which is the unofficial dish of Minnesota. He's the 3-time champion of the Minnesota congressional delegation hot dish off.
I love tater tots.
This guy, I love tots.
Fucking A.
Give me some of your
school,
tots.
Pizza day and tater tots were just like,
yeah. This guy's a fucking delight.
Yeah.
Like, he is. And he, like, I'm just really enjoying getting to learn more about him. Like, the more stories I read, the more I'm like, I like it. I like that he is normal. I like that he seems very authentic. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Like, I texted my boss Nina, and I was like, "Thanks for loaning us your governor." Like,
right. No shit.
He's doing a good job, and for the first time in a long time, I feel really hopeful.
Right.
Like, I'm really fingers crossed, y'all. Like,
Yeah.
This is our chance to get back to some normalcy. So,
what happens in America is really important around the world. I have friends overseas and friends up in Canada, and they tell us, like, your policies affect us and your worldview affects us. Yeah. It emanates. Reagan affected everything around the world, the way he behaved. Yeah. Him and Jay doing the side by side of JD Vance and Tim Walz is just unbelievable, especially when it comes to authenticity, where JD Vance reeks of inauthentic behavior. He can't be himself because he doesn't know who he is. And he really doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
I watched the speech that Tim Walz gave when Kamala introduced him, and like he said, like, I'm looking forward to debating that guy if he could get off the couch, and everyone laughs because it's a really good line. And then immediately, like, some people in the press want to clutch their pearls. Yeah, and be like, I think we're better than that. Fuck you.
Fuck you, Jake Tapper.
You.
Who you and Dana Bash had a supposed debate on your show, and then somebody lied. And lying is not answering a question. You know, it's not the same as an answer. Okay.
No.
And he lied the entire time, and you never once called him out.
No.
But you're clutching your pearls over that story.
Trump goes on TV all the time and says the most racist, transphobic, just fucking lies all the time. Calls people awful nicknames, like, does whatever, and they're like, what are you gonna do? And like this whole, like, I thought we were gonna go high. Guess what? Going high didn't work. And as we say on our shirts that you can totally buy, the high road can get fucked. Like, this shit's working.
Right.
Like, I'm done taking the high road. I don't take the high road anymore.
Nor do I.
I don't know her. Don't know her.
JD Vance gave a speech the other day, and it's like, and Walz gives a speech in Philadelphia that rocks everybody. I mean, he's a school teacher for years. He's good at talking to people. He didn't know how to use a teleprompter, by the way. Like, that's him. That's just how he communicates. Right. And then JD Vance, following Kamala to Wisconsin, follows her plane on the tarmac like a goddamn weirdo. Like,
doing nothing to beat those rumors that he's not a fucking weirdo. Like, what a weirdo.
And somebody there asked him, he gave a press conference, and there's like 10 people at the press conference.
Yeah.
And one of them says, hey man, you're making fun of Tim Walz, but he's like giving people joy. He's making people happy. What makes you happy? What is an easier question than what makes you happy?
Dude, you're a married man with kids. This answer should be a no-brainer.
You say, the sound of my kids' laughter, watching my wife smile. You could say football. You can say tater tots. Like, and anybody would go, walking with my dog, all those things. And he was like, well, I hate dumb questions, but bogus questions from the media, but whatever. But I'll tell you why I'm mad. And it's like, who needs this?
He's such a piece of shit. He's just also just so disingenuous. Like, there's nothing real about him.
No.
There's nothing real about Trump. Like, this is all just like a power grab, a money grab. It's about keeping Trump out of prison. Like, they don't give a shit about people. They don't. It's gross. And I'm tired of seeing people in our highest office that don't have any desire for public service. It's just about serving themselves.
Right.
And one of the things I love so much about Tim Walz calling out people who are being weird, and I've put this on social media, and I apologize for repeating myself. It's something you and I have been doing on this show since we started.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, you're acting like fucking creeps. Stop acting like a creep. Ew, that's creepy. Why are you acting like that? And Tim Walz, he gets it. Stop acting like a creep. Stop acting like a weirdo. It's not your fucking business what people are doing.
Two Megans.
I don't want to think about the government.
Right.
I want to just live my life, dude.
Two Megans have been freaking out lately. Meghan McCain and Megyn Kelly over Tim Walz. And both of them admitted, like, he's really good.
Yeah.
Like, Kamala Harris is going to win, most likely, because this guy has the riz.
Yeah. Just don't sleep on this, y'all. Like,
right. We can't get complacent.
Don't get complacent. Like, we have to kick their ass in November. He's cheating. There's a lot of things going on at various like election, like voting boards and things like that, election committees in different states. Like, it needs to be like a landslide.
Yeah.
So that he can't be like, it's fucking rigged. Fuck that guy. He's a baby. He's a
huge baby. They both are.
He's like at home right now, just like throwing burgers against a wall and having a tantrum. He is a big fucking baby. He's a weirdo. Like, fuck that guy. Fuck JD Vance. Yay, Tim Walz.
Well, if you're not tired of us, and you want to hear more of our voices, but not talking so much about politics, we co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. Sometimes we get political there, but mostly we just enjoy the movies. And I'm loving what we're going to be talking about next. I mean, right now,
this one,
our current episode is Breaking Away, which was a first watch for Sonia, and she really enjoyed it.
It was so good, and I really thank you for pushing that one my way. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm really excited for our next one because we're going to talk about Charlie's Angels, which I remember going to see. Well, I just remember going to see it and thinking this is going to be real bad. And then thinking, well, that was really fucking fun.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a fun rewatch. And I'm looking forward to talking about it with you.
So that's Dorking Out Show. Please check us out there. All those places I mentioned at the top of the show, social media wise, please reach out to us if you have ideas or suggestions for creeps and non-creeps. Our email, once again, if you want to keep it more private, it's whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like some stickers, send us your address and we will drop the mail for you wherever you are on the planet of Earth. We've done it, y'all.
Mm-hmm. She'll do it.
I'll do it. Dare me. Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I guess, if you want. Blue Sky, all the places. Where can people find you, my friend?
I'm trying to build up my Threads, so if y'all can follow me on Threads, that'd be amazing. I'm at Brooklyn Fit Chick on Threads and Instagram. I'm on Brooklyn Margot. I'm on TikTok, and I'm at Twitter. I blocked Twitter because I think I'm going to have to drop that one day because it's Elon Musk suing advertisers for not advertising with him when he told them a year ago to get fucked.
It's so funny. So I'm like, oh my God.
We have a bunch of topics for our next bonus episode because there's so much.
I can't wait. We need to do it real soon.
Yeah. All right, y'all. In the meantime, stay cool. Stay safe.
Be safe.
Be kind. Enjoy tater tots. Just don't be a creep.
Be a creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.